Today, we are diving deep into one of the most pivotal promises in the entire biblical story, the Davidic covenant. It's this fascinating story about a king's heartfelt offer and God's absolutely stunning plot twist. So, let's get right into it.
So, what's the big deal with God's promises to people anyway? Well, to really get the weight of the promise made to David, you've got to understand that the whole biblical narrative is built on these crucial agreements called covenants. Each one builds on the last, pushing the story forward.
Now, while there are several covenants in the Bible, the story really hinges on four key ones. We're going to do a quick flyby of the first three because they set the perfect stage for the dramatic promise God makes to David.
This journey of promises starts out really broad with Noah and all of humanity. Then it kind of narrows to one family with Abraham. And finally, it focuses on an entire nation through Moses. As you can see, the focus gets sharper and the stakes get higher with each step.
First up, Noah. After the Great Flood, God makes a universal promise to all humanity. The key goal here wasn't salvation itself, but to preserve the world as a stable stage where the drama of salvation could play out. And get this, it was a unilateral promise from God, meaning there were no strings attached.
Next, we get to Abram, and the promise gets a whole lot more specific. It's no longer for all of humanity, but for one man and his future descendants. God makes two key promises, people and land. A great nation would come from Abraham, and they'd have a place to call home. And just like with Noah, this was another one-way promise, all on God's end.
And that brings us to Moses. This is a massive turning point. Here, God forms Abraham's descendants into the nation of Israel. But for the very first time, a condition is introduced. God says, "I will be your God and you will be my people." But this promise hinged on a very big if.
This really clarifies the difference, right? The covenants with Noah and Abraham were unilateral. They were unconditional guarantees from God. But the Mosaic covenant, that's bilateral, a two-way street. Israel's blessing now depended on their obedience to God's law. This sets up a lot of the tension for the rest of the story and leads us right to David.
So now we arrive at King David. He's united the kingdom, established his capital in Jerusalem, and brought the Ark of the Covenant, the symbol of God's presence, into the city. He's at the height of his power and his faith, and he's got a grand plan.
You have to get the picture. David is finally at peace. His enemies are defeated, and he's living in a beautiful palace made of cedar wood. He finally has some time to kick back and think, and his thoughts turn to God. David compares his own luxurious life with the Ark of God, which is still housed in a humble tent, just like it was during the years of wandering in the wilderness. He feels like this is just deeply wrong, and he decides he has to do something about it. He's going to build a magnificent, permanent temple, a house for God. But God's response, delivered through the prophet Nathan, is nothing short of a shocker. It completely flips David's plan on its head. God essentially says, "You're going to build a house for me? No. I am going to build a house for you." So here's the key, this brilliant play on the word house. David was thinking of a physical building, a temple, but God was talking about a dynasty, a royal family, a bloodline that would last forever. God is saying that the foundation of faith isn't what we do for him, but receiving what he has done for us.
So what did God's promise to build David's house actually entail? Well, it breaks down into three specific, world-changing components. And with this new promise, we're back to an unconditional gift from God. These three pillars are a specific descendant who will take the throne, a radically new kind of relationship between God and that king, and an astounding promise of a throne that will last forever.
First, God guarantees a successor. He tells David that his own son will sit on the throne after him. And, in a little nod to David's original desire, God makes it clear that it will be this son, not David, who will actually build the temple.
The second feature is a total game changer. God promises to relate to David's son as a father. This is so important. Unlike the gods of the ancient Near East who were fickle and transactional, this offers an intimate, permanent relationship. And unlike the Mosaic covenant where sin could lead to rejection, God says here that if the king messes up, he will discipline him with love, like a father disciplines a son, but he will never take away his favor, like he did from King Saul. This makes the covenant unbreakable by human failure.
And that leads to the third and most breathtaking part of the promise. God repeats the word forever. Your house, your kingdom, and your throne will all be established forever. This is an unconditional promise of eternal rule for David's family.
But if you know your history, an immediate and obvious question comes up. We know David's kingdom didn't last forever in a political sense, so how can this promise possibly be true? Let's just face the problem head on. David's actual dynasty eventually came to a sudden end. The kingdom was conquered and the throne was left empty. So what happened? Did God's unbreakable promise break?
A quick look at the historical record confirms the problem. The kingdom split in two. The northern half completely rejected David's line and was destroyed. And the southern kingdom of Judah, which was ruled by David's line, was eventually destroyed by the Babylonian Empire.
The answer lies in understanding the ultimate fulfillment of the promise. This covenant wasn't pointing to a temporary, earthly political state. It was pointing to an eternal, spiritual kingdom of God that would be established through David's ultimate descendant, Jesus Christ. His kingdom will never be destroyed, thus fulfilling the promise in a way far more majestic than David ever could have imagined.
And so we come back to the powerful reversal at the very heart of this whole story. It's a fundamental shift in perspective from what we can accomplish for God to what God has already accomplished for us. And that leaves us with a final thought. We spend so much of our time trying to build our own houses, our careers, our families, our legacies. But this story asks a challenging question. What's the difference between a life built by our own strength versus a life we allow God to build for us?